Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Alyssa Koff. We're going to get started in just a minute. Right now, while we're waiting for everybody else to join us, if you wanted to go ahead and pop in the chat where you're calling from, that would be great. I'm joining you from right outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in a town called Newburyport. We're about 30 miles north, and it's beautiful today. Where's everybody else coming from? Oh, wow. Okay. So I see New Jersey coming in, Denver, Colorado. We've got Orlando, the great state of Texas. Wonderful. Hello from Notre Dame, Indiana. LA, one of my favorites. Um, Great. Everybody's coming from all over the place. West Palm Beach, very nice. Um, Looks great. Oh, people are coming from Virginia. It looks like we have quite a few people here already. It's about 3:05, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said before, my name is Alyssa Koff, and I am the Senior Digital Marketing Manager here at ACUE, and you're joining us for today's webinar from Policy to Practice, Scaling Digital Accessibility in the Classroom, presented by the Association of College and University Educators, ACUE. For those less familiar with our work, ACUE partners with higher education institutions to deliver excellence in every classroom through a complete faculty development ecosystem, including the only nationally recognized certification in effective teaching that's endorsed by the American Council on Education. Before we dive in, I just want to um, do a couple of different housekeeping items. I want to first say that we welcome you to use the chat. We love you to do that, to communicate with one another and to comment on discussions and share ideas. But if you have a question for the panel, please use the Q&A rather than the chat. When possible, we'll address the questions throughout the presentation, but we'll have time set aside at the end to answer all the questions. Um, so, with that said, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Julie Candio-Seckel. Julie is the Executive Director of Content and Learning Innovation at ACUE. She's joined by an amazing panel who will discuss scaling digital accessibility in the classroom. So, without further ado, let me just turn. I'm going to invite Julie to come back. There she is.
Yay, I'm here. Thanks, Alyssa. I'm so
No problem.
excited to introduce our panelists for today. We have Mark Greenfield, who's the chair of the Association for Computing Machinery for the ACMUS Technology Accessibility Subcommittee. Also joining us is JP Horn, who is an associate professor and BSW program coordinator at CSU East Bay. And finally, we have Jim Stockwell, who is an instructor of film and broadcast journalism at McHenry County College. So we thought we'd just do a little pulse check to start today. Alyssa's going to launch a poll. And we wanted to get your thoughts on how confident you are in meeting accessibility compliance at your institution or in your classroom. So you'll see the poll pop up, and we'd love to just start by hearing from you. Awesome. So thanks, Alyssa. We'll give this a couple more seconds. All right, Alyssa, let us know when we have enough responses here. Awesome. So we have about 22% of folks feeling very confident, 33% confident, and then in the somewhat confident or not as confident, we have about 45% here. So this is great. This is super helpful for all of our panelists today to kind of know how you're approaching this work and kind of where you're at right now. So we thought we'd start just by hearing from the panelists about what their professional or personal connection is to this accessibility work. They all shared our stories with us, and we thought they were so interesting. So we thought we'd have them each share a little bit with you about that. So, Mark, you want to get us started?
Sure, thanks, Julie. So I got my start in accessibility back in the early days of the web. I was fortunate to be working at a research university when the web is invented and took a calculated guess that the web might become a thing, and it did, and I kind of changed my career path. So I've been involved with web development from the early days of the web. And then as accessibility became a bigger concern with everything we're doing online in the late 1990s is when I first started working quite a bit on the accessibility piece and actually spent the last part of my career as the web accessibility officer at the University of Buffalo. So been involved with this for 25 plus years and really interesting to see how it's evolving and the potential for doing even more than we're doing right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. What about you, JP?
Thank you. So I got my start before I was a faculty member. I did community-based services for people with disabilities in their homes. And then I worked in accessibility services at the university, and then eventually became the Associate Director of Accessibility Services at a graduate medical training program. And so I've been very involved in trying to figure out ways to make things accessible for students in the classroom for quite a while. And then when I became a professor, I joined our department, which I think does a wonderful job at our university of making things accessible for our students. And it's something that we've continued to be committed to as we move through this work, particularly with all of the new online guidelines.
Excellent. Thanks, JP. And then Jim?
Thank you, Julie. I had the very distinct honor early on in my broadcasting career. I worked in what would be known as public radio, and we did a service for the blind and the visually handicapped that would read the newspapers and local stories to keep them updated. People that couldn't read the newspaper, we would read it for them. And so when I got into higher education, I continued to do that and think about the individuals that were in our classroom in helping them be successful in whatever it is. And if there is some hurdles that were placed in the way, what can we do to help them overcome that?
Love it. So everybody coming kind of from different experiences, but sharing in the commitment to this work. So I think it's just helpful to have some context there. So to start, we thought it would be helpful to have Mark kick us off with a little bit of high level context setting on where we stand with accessibility guidelines in the US today and share a little bit about how this work extends beyond just compliance. So, Mark?
Great, thanks, Julie. And let me preface my comments by saying anytime I'm talking about what's happening in the legal space around accessibility, it's very fluid. Things change all of the time. So this is based on what I know as of today, but that may change tomorrow. As most of you are aware, the ADA Title II deadline, which was originally for larger entities, the deadline was April of 2026. That has been extended by 1 year. So I think that's important for people to, about a little bit of breathing room. But one of the most important things to remember is that these laws are in effect today. The ADA still applies to everything that we do online. What we don't have with the Title II rule being extended is clarity on what it actually means to be accessible. So that's why the ADA Title II rule was so important, because it provided that clarity. Another thing that's important to remember is that there are accessibility laws at both the state and federal level. So many states have their own laws related to accessibility. And in many ways, those laws are a little bit more demanding in terms of what the expectations are. So Based on my conversations with lawyers, and I like to tell people that I am not a lawyer, so don't take this as legal advice at all. But I personally, in talking with lawyers, don't think there is enough time to make any significant changes to the ADA Title II rule. That is very unlikely, although the current administration is somewhat unpredictable in terms of what they're going to do, so I wouldn't completely rule that out. The other thing to remember from a legal perspective is that private citizens or students don't need to go through the Office of Civil Rights or through the Department of Justice. They can just sue you in federal court. And that is a much different experience compared to dealing with the OCR in a relatively, win-win kind of situation where the OCR wants to help you. When you end up in federal court, it is much more challenging to do what you need to do. So even if something happened where they rescinded the ADA Title II rule, or the Department of Justice decided they're not really going to spend time enforcing it, you still have to be thinking about what would happen if somebody sued you and you went directly to court. So with that, can we have the next slide, please? Back one. So as much as the legal compliance gets everyone's attention, in my personal opinion, it is not the most important reason why digital accessibility matters. So I like to use a couple of additional things for people to think about. The first is the idea of the missing 20%. There are different surveys, different studies that are done, but usually the number comes in around 20%, being the number of people who have a disability that limits their ability to use the web or digital. So your 20% is a very significant number. So keep that number in mind. The other thing is that when you address accessibility issues, you are improving the user experience for all. And one of the ways to think about this is that for something that might, when you're on a website for a traditional typical user, what is frustrating for you, for somebody with a disability, it might be a complete barrier where they would be unable to use that site whatsoever. Another thing for a lot of people, especially in higher education, is the idea of organizational social responsibility. It is morally, ethically the right thing to do. And it's been interesting as, we look at DEI and, some of the people, I personally like to think of DEI directly connected to accessibility. And I continue to make those arguments even with the current administration kind of taking a different lens when it thinks about DEI. But for me, accessibility is about inclusion. It is about equity. And when I'm doing consulting work, a lot of times I will go and look at the mission vision statement for a particular college or university, and I almost always find language related to inclusion, related to equity. So I like to try to make that connection with accessibility to those ideas. Another thing that I try to do in my consulting work is to get people to think about accessibility as an investment, not as a cost center. There's actually been a lot of research done, and this research usually will tie accessibility and usability together, but the research shows a huge return on investment when you start doing things that address accessibility issues and address usability issues. You're actually getting a huge return on that investment. So a lot of people, and this is one of the reasons why the Title II regulations have hit a little bump in the road, is that people look at the amount of money that it takes to maybe go back and remediate a lot of content. I try to get leadership and administration to look at this through a different lens. Let's look at this as an investment, not as a cost. Another important thing for faculty is that there is a lot of research out there that shows that addressing accessibility will improve your learning outcomes. There is a direct connection between accessibility and universal design for learning. So if you really care about what your students learn and care about your learning outcomes, accessibility gets you heading in the right direction. And just kind of follow up on that, research shows accessible design enhances comprehension and engagement for all learners. So next slide, please. So one of the things to keep in mind from a very high level is your campus wants a sustainable accessibility program. Too often people look at accessibility as a project. We have the ADA Title II deadline coming next April, so we're going to do all of this work to meet that deadline. The challenge is that projects end. Your work with accessibility does not end. So you need to think about this as a program, not as a project. And the best way to mitigate your legal risk is to look at this as a permanent operational function, incorporating accessibility into your normal workflows, the way that you produce content, making that just part of standard operating procedure is how you get to the sustainable accessibility program. One of the things that is always challenging when I speak with attorneys about this is that perfect compliance is impossible. You will never have every document on your website or every piece of your web ecosystem perfectly, in compliance with the regulations. That makes, that lawyers get very nervous when you talk to them about that, but that's the reality. I've been doing this for 25, 30 years. There's not a website I come across, even good ones, that are perfect. So instead of focusing on being perfect, what you want to do is focus on prioritize documented progress. And I think this is a challenge for a lot of faculty when they first get started. They look at the amount of course materials that they have. They're being told that you have to remediate all of this course content by next April. Heavy lift, may not have the training that they need to get that done. And what I would like people to do, instead of trying to do everything by that next April deadline, think about how you can prioritize progress. What courses get used? What courses are you teaching in the fall or next springtime? How many students are in those courses? Focus your efforts on those rather than trying to remediate everything right from the beginning. Again, this is certainly something you want to talk to your campus council about to make sure that they're comfortable with this idea that perfect compliance is impossible. But based on my conversations with attorneys, based on my knowledge of how the Office of Civil Rights works, that's really what they're looking for, is they want you to be making progress. They want you to be documenting that progress. And another way to think about this is the idea of due diligence, taking reasonable steps to satisfy a legal requirement. And what I tell people is to kind of picture yourself in a pre-litigation posture. Picture yourself on the defense stand, and somebody is asking you, all of your website's not perfectly accessible. What do you have to say about that? So the more you can demonstrate that you've been taking this seriously and you have been doing things that you're supposed to be doing, that will mitigate your legal risk substantially. All right, next slide. The last thing I want to mention is there are a lot of things that campuses should be doing to support their faculty and staff. Training is the biggest thing. Nobody intentionally makes inaccessible content. They just don't know what it takes to make something accessible. And most of the time, it is relatively easy to do. You just have to have the right training. Also making sure that there are realistic expectations in terms of how fast things can get done. A lot of accessibility is fairly simple to do. Other parts of it are rather complex. So being realistic about what can be done in the time frame we're talking about. And then that kind of ties into prioritization, making sure that you really look at the low-hanging fruit. What can you do that's relatively easy, that has a big impact? Start with that and just start working your way through that prioritization list. Another thing that campuses can do is look at enterprise level tools. There are a number of tools out there, whether related to captioning, automatic checkers built into a lot of the products that we're using, a lot of services for PDF remediation, et cetera, et cetera. Campuses should be providing their faculty and staff these tools to really assist with getting this work done. And then another thing which I have found very successful is looking at creating student remediation teams. This is something when I was still working on a campus, we did very successfully. And there is a very talented, very dedicated labor pool on your campus. So finding students, training students to help with this is a very cost-effective approach in terms of trying to build out your accessibility program. All right, on to the next slide.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. A lot of super helpful insights there. I think one of the things that resonated with me too is just that this work is something that benefits all learners, and that's something that we focus on here at ACUE, that just incorporating accessibility practices into your teaching is fundamental to good teaching as a whole. And so that's one of the things that we really make efforts to support faculty in. It's part of our effective teaching certification. And so something else that is really top priority for us here is not just telling people about good teaching practices, but actually showing them. And so we thought we'd bring some of our awesome faculty in today to show you some easy, low-hanging fruit strategies that you can do to start taking on this work in bite-sized pieces so that it's not just a project, to Mark's point, but it's an ongoing effort to make progress in this area. So I will pass it over to JP for the first couple of demos.
All right, thank you so much. And I hopefully adjusted my microphone. So folks, I hope you can hear me. So one of the things that I wanted to do today is show folks some things that you can do in Microsoft Word as well as in Canvas. Because one of the issues that I find now in my current role as the new chair of our department in social work is I have a lot of faculty saying, hey, like there are these new requirements that I have to follow, and it's just a lot of work. Like, what can I be doing in order to make sure that I'm being compliant and making sure that everything is compliant? And I'm all about that that kind of low effort, like what can we do that is kind of a low effort beginning stage thing. And so that's what I want to start with. And I think the biggest barrier we have is feeling overwhelmed by some of the tools that are in front of us. So I'm going to start with Microsoft Word because I think there are some tools in Word that we're supposed to be using in order to kind of assist with screen readers. And I think some of us may or may not be very familiar with them. But the number one tool that folks are supposed to be very familiar with is this tool up here. It's this when you're in your little home screen, it's called the Style Gallery. It's at the very top of your screen. It pops out. It's the thing that allows you to have things that are like headings and normal, and it has lots and lots and lots of choices. And one of the things that I hear from folks is like, okay, there are like a ton of different choices in here, and sometimes they move around, sometimes they stay where they're supposed to be. I just get very annoyed at them. And I hear you, I feel you. It is very annoying. One of the things most people don't know is that you can make them go away. Anything you're not using, you can absolutely just remove it from the style guide by right-clicking and removing it from your style gallery. So the only things that I use whenever I'm developing a syllabus are normal, heading 1, heading 2, and heading 3. So if it's not any one of those, I generally just pop it out of my style gallery and I just leave what I'm going to use. And that I think helps a lot with just making sure that anything that needs to be formatted for screen readers in order to help somebody who's using a screen reader or helping anybody who's using any kind of assistive technology to access my documents, when I convert this to a PDF or when I convert this to a different format, it tells those different formats what each of these different parts that are part of this document are, right? Like it's tagging it, it's giving it that kind of data that allows it to be seen that way. So that's one of those kind of like low effort things that I think faculty can do is simply just making sure we're using the tools inside of one of the most common platforms we use, which is Microsoft Word, to just make the documents accessible. The other things that I think are important is that Microsoft itself actually has an accessibility checker. So if you go in and you actually ask the document to look for accessibility, it will. And normally it pops up down here next to the language. But for whatever reason, it is decided that it is not going to do that this today. It did it during my test run. It's not doing it right now. That's okay. So give me just 1 second because this wonderful help button at the very top of it, the screen can also tell me how to get there. So give me just 1 second. There we are. now I'm going to be looking for accessibility. So there's an accessibility assistant built into Microsoft Word. And as you can see, there are errors in this document that it says interfere with accessibility. And one of those things is hard to read contrast. So it also says how I could fix it, and it gives me an option. So I just clicked on one of the options and it's fixed it. It's going to tell me that my tables are missing first rows as headers. Now, this is actually a different interesting problem that we can talk about later. But if you look at all of my tables, it is clear that my first row is being used as a header on all of the tables. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the same across, right? So this is one of those situations where our accessibility assistant or the technology that's actually looking at our accessibility is wrong. And as a faculty member, this is where I think a lot of people get frustrated because they're like, man, I want a perfect completion. And I think to Mark's point, like sometimes we're not going to get a perfect score on something because the tool itself is also flawed. And this is like a great example of the tool itself being flawed. This is just one of those low effort things that you can be doing in Microsoft Word to simply help handle your documents. And I want to turn our attention to Canvas next. So give me just a second so I can pop into Canvas. This is a Canvas course shell that I've developed for our department. My hope is that it is big enough for all of us to see. This is one of our main course shells. I'm our lead instructional designer for this particular course. And one of the things that we really like to think about whenever we're designing something for our students is the cognitive load the student has in front of them whenever they're looking at a course, particularly a course like our course for this. This particular course is a very theory-dense graduate student course. And so it's a lot of work, a lot of different modules. The student can feel very easily overwhelmed. And so one of the things that we try to do is we try to lay the course out in just a very logical sequence so that there's predictability in the way that the course is viewed. So you can see the instructor side of this. Everything is laid out in a very predictable fashion. This particular course doesn't have dates that things are starting to appear. So when I go into view a student, you're going to see all of the wonderful Canvas pop-ups. But what you are going to see is that you're going to see tons of lovely predictability, right? It's very easy. It flows. Everything that appears, students know. Module 1, what to do before they come to class, the agenda for the week, the reading quiz, everything that's going to need to get done. They have everything they need to be successful in the course. And it is, again, one of those kind of low effort projects that you can do as an instructor, just laying something out. One of the big things we've learned is that if there is a specific deliverable that is not necessarily connected to the content of a chapter, you are gonna want to put something separate in a module. A great example of this is that they write a paper after they read something on adolescence. And we, for the longest time, everybody was like, where do I submit this paper? And we learned if we put it in with the module, people would just like literally never see it. So we were like, well, let's just do everybody a favor and pop it in there. And that reduces the cognitive load, right? They're not frantically searching for it, then sending an email because they can't find it and then feeling embarrassed that they didn't see it. It actually helps a lot with accessibility because not being stressed out, not having all of those issues with the organization of a course helps our students be successful. And then the last thing I just want to point to, and I think this will also kind of feed into our next thing, is that every single item in this course also meets the guidelines for what needs to be accessible online. So any video that this links to will have captions. Any of the links are going to say exactly where the student is going to be going. All of that is automatically built into each of the courses that I design so that it meets all of the best practices for building things online and digitally. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, JP. And then we have Jim with a couple of demos.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate it. And thank you, Mark and JP, for your wonderful contributions to what we have going on here today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to really look at is from the media standpoint, which is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, seems to be more accessible because we have these kind of ideas and the thoughts in place. One of the things that Mark said, and I really admire it, is that nothing is ever perfect, but we don't necessarily have to worry about doing uh, doing everything perfect. But if we're moving in that right direction, and so our feedback that we get from individuals that need some sort of accommodations is very, very, very helpful to us along the way. And another thing that we want to keep in mind too is that when you make it right for everybody, or you make it accessible for everybody, everybody does get something out of that. So I want to hit on two different areas today. I want to talk about JP led us down the path there a little bit about captioning. And captioning is a very, very important, and it's also something that's very low hanging, as to use the terms that everybody's talking about, that you can do very quickly in your classes. Even if you're not teaching a media class like mine, I'm teaching film, or I'm teaching some sort of broadcasting. We do have the ability to bring in videos. Usually, if you bring them in via some sort of disc, like a DVD or a Blu-ray, there is an option for the caption on there. As a matter of fact, I've been teaching so long, I used to use actual films. And then I went to, probably never heard of this, called VHS. And then eventually I went to Blu-ray. The those items that are getting more modern give us the opportunity for captions. Now, I do want to point out there is sometimes a little confusion about the difference between captions and subtitles. Subtitles are used to put up the words that are being spoken by the individuals on camera. And if it is a foreign language media, it will come up in that language. You can change that language to something else. For example, if you're watching a French film and you want to have English subtitles so you can find out what they're saying. But subtitles isn't enough. What you want to use is captioning, or closed captioning. The reason why we use captioning is it takes care of all of the audio, not just the spoken word. It's easy for us to think, oh, it's got the spoken word. Yeah, but there's other things such as music. Sometimes there's sound effects. Sometimes there's actual nuance. There's different things that go on in a performance that are not just the words. So when you have the opportunity to use a video or use something, make sure you use captioning so that everybody gets everything out of it. You'll see sometimes in parentheses, it'll say telephone rings. That is important to part of the overall content of the film, because that's going to cue the actor to respond. If you don't put that up there, then somebody that may not be able to hear that doesn't understand why they're doing what they're doing. So that's a very important part of the use of media, is to make sure you use captioning rather than just subtitles. Most of your modern stuff, such as any films from really the 21st century here, are usually captioned. Usually your videos from YouTube or one of those other sharing sites do have captions. However, I will tell you what I always advise everybody: use it before you need to use it. In other words, check it. Sometimes captioning might not be correct. We can do the best that we can, just like Mark said. The pursuit of perfection is very difficult, at least if we're moving in the right direction. But always check that as you're looking at it, to make sure that you have that. Okay, so captioning is the route that you want to go. If you don't have access to captioning, subtitles does help. Something is better than nothing. But if you have the option, always use captioning. Now, one other thing that I want to hit on is the actual performances that we use in our class, such as delivering some sort of presentation. So I've got a blank PowerPoint up here right now. Many of us use some sort of PowerPoint, some sort of presentation, whatever it is that we use. Couple of real basic things that can be really set up very quickly. One, make sure your font is very easy to read. New Times Roman or Courier New, just stay with that. That's good. New Times Roman is the one that usually defaults, but sometimes if you have a specific type of slideshow, it may default to something else. So that's a good one. Courier is a very common one. It is used in all screenplays in the Hollywood world. It's used in all because it looks like a typeface. So that one's easy to read. Another thing, and JP brought it up, also, you want to make sure your color contrast works really, really well. Always use colors that can kind of be differentiated between what we're looking at and what we're not looking at. I know it sounds boring, but black and white works. It's kind of like why invent a different mousetrap? It works. Use black and white. Try to stay away from fancy colors. We were talking about it the other day. I had a colleague once made this beautiful PowerPoint right around the holidays, and they made everything green and red. And I tried to explain to them, I said, well, if you got somebody who's colorblind, they're not going to be able to make the difference there. So if you just go with simple colors and simple fonts, it works really well. Another thing that you can do is when you're putting something in here, you have the choices up here. So if I put something in here, I'll just put my name in. You can put it in, and then you'll notice that you've got choices up in the upper top here. Again, what do you want to use? That's what something like if you put Algerian up there, it looks nice, but it can be confusing for somebody to read. So we want to keep that in mind. Also, your color palettes are over here. You can highlight and you can color. I always recommend using the colors that are big contrast, black and white, blue and white. Highlighters can sometimes get lost a little bit, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. And then as you're making the slides, another thing that you can do, there is what are called transitions, and there's what's called animation. Here's the difference. Transitions are when I am revealing something to my audience. I'm talking about a list. Here's the steps that we want to do to make a screenplay. Well, I can use the transitions as I'm talking about it. That can be very beneficial, but it can also cause a little bit of problems. If you put the whole thing up there right away, sometimes people can kind of differentiate, so that works that way. Animation is also when we do between slides, and that can be a little bit distracting for certain people. So if you can avoid that, try to do that. Again, colors and fonts are the big one, but also your transitions and your animation. There is one other item I'll just mention over here. It's your design. When you hit design, you have a lot of choices across there. Sometimes you have some that are straight out of your college. They have their own template, that sort of thing. Think about the color palettes that you have. Think about what you're doing there. And also remember, simple is usually best. It's there. Even though like in my area, I do presentations for a living. I like to have these fancy colors and all that other stuff. Sometimes that can be distracting. So keep it simple and it works out really well. One last thing I'll throw at you here too. It is always a good idea. I saw it pop up in the chat and a couple people mentioned it. It is always a good idea to share your documents and your PowerPoints with your students prior to them actually seeing it. The reason why that's a good idea is that helps them reduce a little bit of anxiety of wondering, oh, do I have to write everything down or do I have to pay attention to everything? They have it for them. They also know what is in store for them. I do that at the beginning of my PowerPoints. I say, okay, we're going to talk about this, 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 and this. And that way they know, oh, okay, this is what's going to be taking place here. You can put them into your Canvas shell just like JP did. And you can also email it out sometimes as well. But it does give them a little bit of reduction in anxiety and it helps make everybody feel welcome in your class.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. Lots of great ideas here today. And so we thought we'd transition into a section on common challenges and misconceptions. So if you are familiar with ACUE's courses, this is one of the core aspects of our learning design, where we typically share some of the difficulties and or some of the misunderstandings around specific teaching topics. So we thought we'd bring this into the presentation by asking each of the speakers to address a common challenge or a misconception related to accessibility. So we're going to start with Mark. A common misconception, Mark, is the difference between accommodations and accessibility. Are they the same thing? Are they different? If not, what is the difference?
All right, just unmuting myself there. So one of the most important things about the Title II rule was a move away from accommodations to an accessibility model. Typically, the way we would approach students with disabilities is that the student would register with the Disability Services Office. They would be able to state what their needs are, and then professors would provide after the fact reactive accommodations for that one student. The Title II rule is very specific that they don't see accommodations as the right approach. Instead, the way to think about it is everything needs to be accessible right from the beginning. That doesn't mean that you're not going to provide accommodations. You are still going to have to provide accommodations, but probably much less in terms of accommodations. But it really is important for everybody to understand that you can't just think, you know what, we're going to just, if a student comes into my class, that's when I'll worry about making it accessible. With the Title II rule, that no longer is the right approach.
Very helpful. Thanks, Mark. JP, coming to you. So you shared with us that one of the challenges that you and perhaps other faculty experience is that sometimes accessibility checkers turn up different results, different checkers, different results. How do you think that faculty who experience that could address that? What do they do?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I have to also say that I was like definitely peeping in the chat, and I saw somebody post that like their university requires 100% for all of the courses in Canvas. And more power to you. I will tell you that every single year I make an exact copy. I teach the exact same sequence of courses every single year, which means that every single document in those courses is exactly copied every single year. And our university switched to an accessibility checking system, and they encouraged us all to use it. So I ran the two most recent courses that I was teaching through the accessibility checker, and it came up with entirely different reasons why some of the same documents were not accessible. And as the person who both designed the documents from scratch and then was like looking at the reasons why the documents were considered to be inaccessible, I just was like laughing and also very frustrated because I was just kind of like, firstly, like they should be identically inaccessible. If you're catching it on this one course, it should be definitely caught on the other course. Some of the things were correct. So like good catch. But like some of the things I was like, no, those are wildly wrong. Like it's just wrong because you're not getting the context in the words prior to this thing or whatever. So I think as faculty, like some of it is understanding that the technology isn't perfect, right? Like we are looking at an AI system that doesn't know every single thing that we know as the people who may have created the document. Or it's a negotiation with our online learning office. So I emailed our online learning office and I said, hey there, like let me outline for you where the limitations of this software are, so that you understand, like I've done the thing you've asked me to do. Here's what happened. What would you like me to do as the instructor for our next steps to make sure that I'm compliant with whatever policy that we're going to be instituting around this issue? But I do think as a faculty member, like it's the thing, like my job is instruction. So like it is the thing that slows me down, right? And so it's frustrating and I feel that. And also inaccessible documents stand in the way of instruction for all of our students. So like, how do I sit with that tension and do both of those things with the administrative headache and also being an instructor? And that's kind of where I'm sitting with it right now.
So there's still a level of discernment required, is your point.
Yep, sorry. That was a very
Awesome.
long way of saying it ain't
No,
perfect. Like, think about it.
no, and I love that you're just connecting it back to good teaching in general, right? That you're still trying to support your students, but this is a barrier that you're still facing.
Hmm.
Love it. Awesome. And then, Jim, we have a misconception for you. So, creating accessible courses is entirely a solo effort. From your experience, what would you say about that? Are there institutional resources people should be leaning into, supports in place, or is it a solo effort?
Wow, what a great question, Julie. Yeah, I'm sure Christopher Nolan makes the films all by himself. So I'm gonna go with the film idea there. It is a Herculean effort and it is a group approach to it. At McHenry County College, we've got an incredible access department. There's so many different people that can help us out, and that is what makes the college work together. And so, you can't do it all by yourself. You have to have people that bring up certain elements so you can say, oh, yeah, I got to do that. You also have limits of our ability. Some of us can't do certain things, but other people can help us. We got note takers, you've got recorders, you've got test readers, you got all that. And so don't think you have to do it by yourself. Reach out and work there. Yes, I know I've been a faculty member for a long time, and I'm sure JP can agree. We like to hold on to everything, and we have our classes there, but just like anything, it is always good to work together with somebody else and have those various different departments pulling in the same direction.
So, leaning into the Office of Accessibility Services, maybe a different idea like Mark shared involving students and preparing
Yeah.
students to support this work. Lots of different ideas, right?
Absolutely. We do a seminar toward the end of the semester, and we bring in individuals that have had accommodations, and we do a thing called what we would like our instructors to know, and they do a kind of a panel thing, tell us things that maybe we overlooked, things that would be very very simple to us may be a barrier, and so at least they allow us, and we can start to move forward, just like JP said. It's a constant evolution. And I like what Marcus pointed out. We can't be perfect, but at least we're moving in the right direction.
Awesome. We have a couple questions that came in. So we're going to, if anybody else has questions, feel free to share them. The first question is for Mark. Someone indicated that they thought they saw a 2028 deadline for a subset of smaller schools. Is that right? If so, what are the criteria? Can you talk a little bit more about the upcoming deadlines?
Sure. So this is specific to the ADA Title II rule. That rule only applies to public colleges and universities. It does not apply to private colleges and universities. That does not mean, however, that private colleges don't need to be thinking about this. What that means is that private colleges don't have the clarity about what it means to be accessible, what the standard is. The Title II rule specifically mentions populations below 50,000 or above 50,000. And that is not the number of students at your school. It is the number of people who you are communicating with. So any kind of, larger public university is working with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So they absolutely have the first deadline, which is next April. For any smaller, if you can prove that you are a smaller school, for example, a community college where your county only has 10,000 students, the deadline is a year later. It is now April of 2028. So they do have an additional year. So that's, I think, where some clarification, is needed in terms, but again, that is specific just to the Title II rule. There are a whole other set of federal laws that you need to be thinking about where you've been expected to do this for the last 25 years. So don't all because you have this deadline. In fact, there has been some court cases where, the people have said, you know what, we have until next April to do this. And every court I have ever seen said that has nothing to do with any of this. You are liable right now. So hopefully that provides some clarification.
And back to your point, it's not doing it merely for compliance, right?
Exactly. There's a whole bunch of other reasons to be doing this.
Great. And then we had a question come in too from Andy. I saw some chatter in the chat about this too, JP, but the question was related to how using the headings in Word is different than just adjusting the font. So I don't know if there's more you want to say about that for screen reader use.
Yeah, I saw the a lot of the different comments, and I really appreciated the different comments. So I do want to clear up one of the things because the other thing that I think got said was like we shouldn't be using bold. You absolutely can use bold. Bold is fine. There's no prohibition on bold. What you don't want to do is use bold instead of using the headings section or the headings in the menu. And the reason for that is because that headings I'm not the computer scientist, that would be Mark. But what I
Yes.
will tell you is that when you tag the little headings thing, it basically puts little metadata on that group of text that says this is this kind of text. And so when a screen reader is looking at the text, it's not just reading the text itself. It's also reading the metadata and interpreting the metadata that's connected to the text. And so that metadata is also telling it, what kind of text is this? Is this the title of the file? Is this the title of a section? Is this the title of or the body of a specific part of text? Is this a caption for a specific thing? Is this a table? Because the screen reader actually may have different instructions for how it reads specific types of text. So for example, if it's saying that it's in a column or it's a table and has a specific type of function, we wouldn't want it necessarily to read it left to right, right? We might want it to go up like this way first, right? So it basically just tells it, tags it in a very special way. And it won't do that if all you do is change the bold, the italics, or the underline. And so that's one of the big reasons why you do it. The other thing that I would say is it also actually reduces the amount of times you have to press the bold button. So that style guide, like that little style thing, the style gallery, you actually can set those with a lot of preset things. So if I know every time I have a heading, I want it to look exactly this way, I can set it. And then every time I have a heading, it looks exactly that way. And I don't have to like keep fiddling with all of the different texts or sizes or bold or italics or any of that. It makes life a lot easier too when it comes to formats.
Awesome. Thanks, JP. I think we have time for one more question. So I'll leave this open to the group, but someone noted that Word is less problematic for them than PDFs. So any one or two quick suggestions you have for making PDFs accessible?
So that would take me an hour to answer how you make PDFs, if not longer. But let me just kind of another way to think about this question. It is much easier to make a Word document accessible than a PDF document accessible. That being said, you can't begin to make a Word document as accessible as a PDF. And that is because Word does not have a lot of underlying code that communicates with assistive technology. So it's kind of like and there's a lot of colleges and universities that have decided, you know what, we are going to leave things natively as Word documents rather than converting them over to PDFs because that PDF remediation is so complicated and so hard to do. And that approach, by the way, is perfectly fine within the context of the law. You don't have to make things PDF, but that's a thing you need to think about. How important is accessibility for you? Because if it really does matter, you can make a PDF much more accessible than any Word document. And I'm happy to talk offline. That's a rabbit hole that gets pretty deep pretty quickly. In terms of making PDFs accessible, you really need to have Acrobat Pro, and then take advantage of the auto tagging features inside of Acrobat Pro. Is kind of my very highest level advice I would provide people. And again, that of all of the things you need to do around remediation and creating accessible content, creating accessible PDFs is by far the most complicated. And you're going to need to have training with that. And that's where students who have been trained on how to remediate PDFs really can provide a lot of value to your campus.
Thanks, Mark. And I see Alyssa popping back up, which means that we're out of time, but I just want to thank everybody here for all of your insights, your demos, your context setting, and I'll pass it back to Alyssa. Alyssa, you're on mute.
Sorry, I forgot that. Thank you, Julie, and thank you to our incredible panelists for such an insightful discussion. That was really interesting and well presented. If you have more interest in deepening your understanding about accessibility and how to implement it in your classroom, ACUE offers an endorsement called Holistic Student Support that provides practical approaches to accessibility and a host of other support areas that can be found in ACUE Commons. And you can learn more about that by going to acue.org, or you can just reach out to partnerships@acue.org to discover how our comprehensive faculty development ecosystem can support your teaching at your institution. I just wanted to also let everybody know that the recording will be coming to you via email probably on Monday. And I will also include the slides or any other materials that we have presented here today. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you.